Alrighty, so how was that exercise? Some people seem to find it a little bit of a challenge. Hopefully this walkthrough will help answer any questions that you may have had. So I'll go ahead and start up the test. By the way, while I'm going, once I've got myself, I've finished everything that I was working on, I actually do a git reset hard so that I'm back to a clean state. You don't need to, these exercises don't build on each other from the source code standpoint. And so, yeah, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that's what I'm doing. So you can feel free to do that if you like. Okay, so I'll just make sure we're running the number 2 tests. And let's take a look at the solution. So first, I'll go ahead and build these compound components, the children components here. And so we have a static on, and that's an arrow function component. And it's going to accept some props. And it'll say props.on. If it is on, then we'll return the props.children. Otherwise, we'll return null. Okay. We'll do the same for off, except in the reverse. So if it is off, then we'll return null. Otherwise, we'll return nothing. Or sorry, yeah. I think you know what I mean by reading my code. So, and then we'll have the button, and that will be a little bit different. Just going to take this switch, bring it up here instead, and we'll accept on as a prop. We'll also accept toggle as a prop, and we don't need children for this one. Cool. And so now comes the part that's a little bit more challenging, and that is using these 2 utility methods from React. So I'm going to go ahead and comment these out, and then we'll return react.children.map, this .props.children. So this is the thing we want to map, and this is what how we want to map those. And that will be return react.clone, clone element. Here, and actually I'll just call this child element. These are React elements that we're cloning. And we're going to clone it with some extra props. And those props will be on, this .state.on, and toggle, this .toggle. So this clone element is responsible for passing these compound components the props that they need to do their job. But what's cool is that all of this is happening under the hood. We don't, from a user standpoint, they don't need to know that's what's going on. They just use these components, and we promise that they'll work together properly. So if I save that, our tests are passing. And if we pop open the example, then we get the exercise is working, or the rendered version is working as well. Okay, what questions do you all have about this? Yeah?
For on and off, you used a ternary expression. Could those be just binary? Like if on is falsy, or yeah, if on is falsy, then render off, props.children for off. If on is truthy, then render props.children. So just like a double ampersand as opposed to...
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah. So this is pretty common to do. And I'm glad that you asked, because I see this all of the time. So this is fine in this case. One time where this has tripped me up is if I have like a list.length. And in this case, what's going to happen in JavaScript is it's going to say, oh, length is 0. That's falsy. So that is what I will return, 0. And so I've had situations like on paypal.com /myaccount/transfer, you'll have your list of contacts, and we had some code there that did something like this, and this user had no contacts, and so it just had a little 0 right there. There was nothing, just a little 0 sitting in the middle of nowhere, because this is something that we did. So that's why I pretty much, if I'm going to do this, then what I'll do is I'll say Boolean. And then when this returns false, that won't render. But that's like implementation detail of React. So I actually prefer to be more explicit, which is why I use the ternaries. So I am definitely going to render something, and I'm going to choose what renders. Good. I'm glad you asked that question. That's pretty common stuff that I see. Other questions? Anything from the chat? Yeah.
I just threw a span inside the toggle element, and that works. And my question is why? Like react.children.map seems to handle that just fine.
You threw a span right here?
No, sorry, just like inside of, in the usage.
Oh, in the usage?
I know I'm not supposed to touch it, but I did.
Right here?
Yeah.
Like that?
Just as a sibling of
Oh,
the
I
other.
see, I see, yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious what would happen.
Yeah, so let's actually take a look at that. You actually see the warning right there, but you can see it in the browser as well. It's going to say, hey, you passed on a non-Boolean attribute of on to a span. And so what's happening here is this is also a React element that renders a DOM node. And we're passing props on and toggle to this span. So it'd be like on equals hi there, whatever. On is not a property that span can accept. So I wouldn't do that, and we'll actually, there are ways that you can get around that problem. Actually, I can talk about that. But that's what's happening. So it works, but you get this warning because it's passing a non-DOM attribute to this DOM node. So a way that you could get around that is add a little check in here that says if it's one of my static components, then don't clone the element. Yeah. So and you could make it like a static compound components equals this array toggled on and so on and so forth, and then you check is it in there. If it's not, then I won't clone it. Good question.
I think a point of confusion for me was when I was cloning the element and then passing this .toggle as toggle into the child, as opposed to using this .toggle within the static button. That threw me for a second.
So you, just to make sure I
For
understand.
the on-click for the button, I used this .toggle as opposed to passing it in the prop.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. And did that work? It wouldn't have worked.
No,
I'd be surprised if it worked.
Yeah.
The reason it wouldn't work is because this is a static property, you have no instant or access to the instance. So you could make it work like this, except then you wouldn't be able to use those down here. So actually that wouldn't work. So yeah, that's why you have to accept it as props. But what's cool about this is it's all implicit. So it maybe complicates the implementation a tiny bit, but that's in favor of the users of our component.
Sure. You said you wouldn't be able to use those elements in the render if they weren't static. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So if I remove these this static property, now these are instance properties. So I can reference it like this .on, but if I reference it off of the class, they're actually not properties of the class when they're not static. And so where I'm using it right here, I'm actually referencing it off of the class. That make sense?
Yep.
Cool. I should also mention there's actually nothing sacred about putting these on the class as static properties. You could just as easily take these and move them up here, and then instead of static, const, and then use those like that. If I'm going to do compound components, I like to make it a static property on the class just to make the relationship more explicit, just as a communication device to those who are using the code and looking at the code later. But yeah, there's nothing you absolutely have to do. Is there a question on chat?
Can you use array.map instead of react.children.map?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me restore things back to order here. So we could use this .props.children.map, and that would actually work in our case unless there was only one child. So React actually, when you have one child, children is assigned to that element rather than an array of those elements. If you're using Preact, it actually will always be an array, but in React, it can be just the one element if there's only one, which is why React.children.map exists. I remember once looking into the source code for React children map, and I was like, oh, it'll just be simple. Like, if it's an array, then no, it's not. I honestly, I don't know what it does. It was like a lot bigger than I expected. So that might be a fun exercise for you to go in later and figure out what on earth this method is doing. Because, yeah, I don't know. I didn't take any more time to look into it. So hopefully that answers your question. Does anyone else have questions? Okay, cool. Let us move on to our next, oh, sorry, whew, that was a close call. Let's go ahead and submit our feedback and elaboration. So you can reiterate the things that you learned, make sure that you retain those things, and then we'll move on to the next exercise. What were some of the things that you wrote in your elaboration and feedback? What did you learn as a recap for all of us? Yeah.
I never knew about children.map or clone element, so it's cool.
Nice, yeah. So this is like literally the only time I ever use those methods. And in Downshift, we could use a React-specific method like that, but it supports Preact as well, and so I just wrote my own little like two-liner. So yeah, I don't even use it in Downshift. But it is there are a handful of those React.Children utilities that you can go check out. They can be kind of handy sometimes.